All right, guys. So essentially, this is the bi-weekly AMA for anybody that's new. We do these every 2 weeks. AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. So, of course, if you have any questions, this is a good format. In order to do it, feel free to speak up at whatever point. We want these to be somewhat interactive or more interactive. Let's see if we can get this. That may work a little better there. We want to get these a little bit more interactive. So, feel free to speak up at any time. I'm going to go through and discuss what's been completed over the last 2 weeks on the 5.1 update. And then I'm going to touch on kind of what's happening next, where we're going from there, what our development timelines look like, and then we'll kind of open it up to questions if anybody has any. So, just last night we got Beth, if anybody's familiar, that's one of the use cases building on Nexus, the biological and ecosystems futures. They're a full carbon credits trading platform, so they're a full exchange right now. They're running on the 5.1 update. They are basically I guess you could call it a carbon credits auctioning service, and where you can register. One of their core principles is basically incentivizing creating biodiversity. So they've created a way where you can actually earn money by planting trees, right? And you get awarded these credits, and then other people buy them, and so on and so forth. So it creates this really cool virtuous cycle that can help, in the generating of more trees. I'm essentially, if anybody wasn't familiar, trees only really consume carbon dioxide when they're growing, right? So you need constant growth. I think the Amazon rainforest and the Congo and some of the Russian forests produce a lot of the oxygen in the Canadian forests in the world. So Beth is focusing on that end. We just got their network updated the other day. I got all of their bug lists done. I've gotten all of AonWise's bug lists done. So it's pretty much ready to ship and wrap as far as the hybrid mode. So we're deploying some of the hybrid networks right now, getting them to upgrade and doing our final set of debugging. The Precision T class worked great. If you guys remember that, I had to write a whole class in order to handle floating point precision. I had to go pretty down to the lower levels and actually dig out and parse the strings properly, because everything that related to floating points just was crap. So I created our own little software virtualized floating point library that we use for financial applications that gives you very precise figures, right? So got that all piped in, got everything running. There's a couple bugs that I had to go through, got them solved. So Mike's just doing a little bit of testing today, and we're updating more of his nodes. As far as I understand, everyone else has been having smooth sailing with it. It's been working well. So the last little bit of line items that I have to do for this specific update is I have to tie some legacy stuff. So I'm pivoting now from hybrid mode into testnet. I've already debugged a lot of the testnet stuff, but I just need to add a couple little things such as credits to legacy. And I'd say probably another day or two's work for wrapping up the client mode stuff, just making sure all of that's working. And that way I'm designing it right now so you'll be able to support light mode when the wallet first starts. So you won't have to synchronize the whole blockchain. If you're not going to be staking, there's no point in having an entire copy of the whole blockchain, because also other people aren't really going to be syncing from you very much, depending on your internet connection. So the client mode will be really, really nice for new users starting up. And I mean, believe it or not, one of the biggest issues in support we've seen is running out of disk space. People run out of disk space, and I think we're closing out on like 30 or 40 gigs now. So reducing that disk footprint is really valuable. I think we're at about like half a gigabyte or something right now for a client mode node to run. So if anybody wasn't familiar, the mobile wallet runs its own embedded node, and that's really important too, because that also augments is creating this new type of framework, right? Not on this first 5.1 release, the mobile wallet embedded node is coming out in the 5.1 release, but the development version of the mobile wallet node will be coming in a later version. So essentially one thing that we're aiming to do is make development of Android and iOS apps really, really streamlined and simple. So we're not just focusing on decentralized blockchain stuff. I mean, we more see the decentralized blockchain technology as a subset of a larger framework that can power your normal everyday apps. They don't have to be dApp specific, right? A lot of crypto industry right now, they're all blockchain specific use cases. Hey, I got this DeFi token, or I have these NFTs or things like that. We're focusing on, okay, well, authentication. developing an authentication system is cumbersome. And there's a lot of security qualities to it that you got to be really careful of, because if that gets penetrated, then everyone else is completely, SOL, right? So you do things like password hashing. And a lot of people really, if they're developing a big app, they'll use like OAuth, and they'll actually just pay Google to use it, right? So that's where the login with Nexus comes in really valuable, right? So we're focusing on looking at the web as a whole and seeing not just what can blockchain do for the web, but like what are pre-existing services in the web already that we can do better, right? You don't change things by fighting an existing reality. You change things by creating a new model that renders the existing model obsolete. So in that sense, that's what we're doing. So Nexus in itself, the LLM is a really powerful web framework, along with having blockchain functionality in it. And it does all this heavy lifting for you. So that's what we're really designing our APIs to do, right? So when we get to the development mode side, we want to make it so that you can deploy iOS and Android apps really quickly, because you don't have to worry about all these specific cumbersome details. The framework can handle a lot of that for you. And that kind of ties forward to when we get to the operating system. And that's essentially going to be kind of an IoT framework too. Because I ran into a big incentive issue with IoT, which anybody wasn't familiar, Internet of Things. That's kind of like your smart washer, your smart thermostat, things like that. For one, they use really poorly developed protocols. So like a Nest thermostat, if anybody has one, be careful, because those things can actually get you hacked. You can hack through the Nest thermostat and get into someone's network and then do some ARP poisoning and random middle attacks, and boom, right? And as anybody didn't see too, more recently there was a lot of cryptocurrencies stolen through BGP routing hijack, which border gate protocols. I learned this from Dino. It's a very authenticated protocol. So like let's say you own a block of IP addresses, 256 for say, and because you purchased them from the domain, I don't know exactly what authority handles the IP addresses, but you purchase these IP addresses and you may activate them. They're activated through what's called border gate protocol, and that's where you say, hey, I'm the owner of these IP addresses. They're in my router, so send all the packet routes to me. Border gate protocol is not authenticated, so boom, I can just go out and spoof border gate protocol messages and be like, no, those are my IP addresses. And there's no real way to know unless you have all these secondary things. Another issue is ARP, address resolution packets. Those are really easily spoofed. Pretty much everything in computers nowadays, except for your login to your account, is not authenticated. Everything on the network stack is not authenticated. Your MAC address is not authenticated. IoT devices a lot of times use just username, password. So why I went on this tangent a little bit is the IoT industry has this massive incentive issue for security, because everybody's rushing to get to market, and a lot of times they're going to use outdated hardware, and it doesn't really necessarily function the best that it could, but it doesn't matter as long as someone's buying it, right? So there's this incentive issue with it. So that's the first step that we're focusing the operating system for, is to essentially make it very simple and easy to develop high performance, high security, IoT devices. And that's how we're going to really target and get those first ones kind of kicking off, because it builds a streamlined connection between your IoT device and Nexus, and then to the satellites and everything like that. So the reason I went talking on that is because it's part of our core philosophies, right, of developing technologies that essentially make life easier, maybe reduce your total number of developer cycles, rather than just playing on, oh, hey, this is blockchain, you want to use it because it's blockchain. There was a lot of people that would just be like, well, why don't I use a database, right? So we're not focused on selling it just on the merits of blockchain, but actually on the merits of the technology and the framework. So that's why we focused really on developing a web framework, right? That's why it's API driven. Like I said, if anybody saw my Anarchapulco demonstration of the search engine, I did that in about 200 lines of PHP code, right? Really simple. It didn't take much at all, because Nexus does all this heavy lifting for you. So that's really what we're focusing to provide. And we want to do the same thing for mobile app development, right? Where you could simply just use Nexus or run your own hybrid network just for your authentication system, so that you don't want to pay OAuth, and you get all these additional functionalities, but you don't necessarily have to have an app that you design to use a blockchain with. The blockchain kind of helps augment and provide functionality that your app already needs, right? Such as your login system. And that's where the login with Nexus is going to be really important. So this 5.1 is this preliminary framework, right? It contains, the decentralized exchange, so like a peer-to-peer marketplace. And if anybody didn't notice, I've posted Bitcoin Source 1.0 in our repository. If you want to go look at it, that's the very first code Satoshi ever released, like before anyone touched it but Satoshi, just pure Satoshi. And in there was a market. It got taken out by the Bitcoin developers later down the road, but he anticipated, he wanted to have a free market built into the core level Bitcoin protocol, where people could buy and sell freely without having, any sort of interference from regulatory bodies. So we're bringing that back, right? And this market, it handles everything on chain. Right now, it is just token to token, but you'll be able to sell an asset or a tokenized asset, and this will really help add to the values of your tokenized assets as well. Like, let's say you tokenize a company and you make 1,000 tokens to represent that company's ownership, then you can sell 100 of those tokens as a type of fundraising, which then entitles you to split dividends or receiving some of that revenue, right? And you'll be able to use that for splitting revenue within your companies, things like that. So all of that's working. It's just finished testing. I'm sorry if I'm a little slow today. I didn't get much sleep. I was up working late to get all of this done, but it's done. It's done. All of the hybrid stuff is done. It's running right now. We're getting everybody upgraded. So I just have pretty much finishing the legacy stuff, which if anyone isn't aware, I sometimes have to switch between hybrid. I usually start with hybrid because that's the core functionality, and then legacy or mainnet stuff has additional little bells and whistles, such as dealing with legacy transactions and all these other instances. So it's all pretty much ready to go. All the code's in there for all the legacy stuff. It just needs to be debugged a little bit, and I need to add a little bit of code for the client mode using some of the new dynamic indexing services that I've created now. But it's pretty quick. It's been really good to see, and everything's really templated. So development, this has been a huge feat because, for one, the first year post Tritium development, I was working on the constant time database, and that's really what I primarily, in the operating system, I got a lot of those done. I got the operating system to boot up. I designed the architecture, and if anybody remembers, we published that white paper at the end of 2020. And during that process, before publishing the paper, I had been hacking around at kernels and stuff too, which is just for fun, because it's just been, I don't know, I like low level stuff. So that was what I did really in 2020. I finished the constant time database. I got that working, and some of the operating system. And while we're on the subject, the constant time database, this is, I think, a really, really important. This goes with the philosophy of saying we're here to power the web, right? Not necessarily make blockchain relevant. Not to say blockchain isn't relevant, but I think a lot of people put too many eggs in the basket of, hey, this is blockchain, so therefore you want to use it. But a lot of people don't necessarily know how to use it. So this framework that we've developed, the Tau framework, it gives people really simple tools that use it in an effective way, right? That make it, a really effective framework to develop on. We have lots of people developing on Bubble with no code type plugin. I mean, developing pretty complex applications, just using the Nexus API, having it do most of the heavy lifting. So it's a really beautiful, powerful framework. But to the database, I've been requested numerous times to develop an interface, a database interface for it. So that's probably something that I'm going to be doing after I finish wrapping up all this legacy stuff. Is I'm going to be getting the constant time database developed as a service. I think we're going to call it NDB, Nexus Database, or I think I have LLDB. I have one of the domains for it, but there's a lot of people that could benefit greatly from it. I mean, even other blockchains, right? So once I finish all that, probably not going to do it super near term, but I'm going to actually create a custom Bitcoin core using the lower level database, and then we'll host that on our repository so other people that need to run a full Bitcoin node can use, the Nexus version of that full Bitcoin node, which will give you a lot of those really nice features. And it'll also be a great demonstration of the technology. You can run it side by side with conventional Bitcoin core running LevelDB and see the difference in the performance and the disk utilization. From what I recall, those last numbers were about 30% less. And I tested it up to 500 million keys, and it stayed pretty much 450,000 random reads per second consistently. Right. The only time that you'd have some differences and deviations from that is if you run out of paging memory and you're having to actually page more from the disk and stuff. That's something you just can't control. But the reason that we can make the claim of it being constant time is constant time does not imply faster. It just means that it it stays constant. It's this constant number of operations that are required for it to perform that same task, no matter how big the data set is. We happen to have a constant time database that happens to be 4 or 5 times as fast. A lot of times constant time stuff isn't always faster. Like if you do, like there's a constant time unordered map versus a standard map. And the unordered map, I think, doesn't really start to exceed the standard map until like 100,000 keys or something like that, or 1 million or something like that. You won't really see much difference. But the lower level database is at least 4 or 5 times faster than Google's level DB, which is the primary database that everyone else uses. So this is another kind of, I guess you could call it marketing, or one of the techniques that we've been using to market Nexus is developing value in other industries that are independent of just the Nexus community, in the Nexus developer ecosystem. But to develop this lower level database, they can also be deployed as your own service, which is obviously powered by some form of Nexus technology, but then that creates a reflected value back into the system. Oh, okay, well, they developed this database that's 10 times faster than Redis and 5 times faster than LevelDB, and oh my gosh, my SQL can only do 2,000 reads per second. This thing's doing 100, 200,000. Whoa, so it really, it's being designed to really improve the overall infrastructure of the web, right? And that ties in with the IoT too as well, because like I said, the IoT is really bad security because there's just not much incentive for having good security. There's people that aren't suing them enough, and it's just too cheap to get it out to market. So this, ideally will help lower your development costs, right? Nexus should lower your development costs, or the required development costs, which is really, I think, going to be an important incentive for people to start to use it. Okay, well, I could, use Ethereum and have to pay 5 developers $200K a year, or I could just pay a couple web developers and use Nexus, and Nexus runs faster. It'll just be more economical. And I think, in this time we're in right now with, inflation everywhere, cost of living just keeps getting higher and higher. It's becoming increasingly difficult for people to make ends meet. People are going to be looking how to reduce that footprint, and Nexus is one of those things that can do that, right? It's going to reduce your overall server infrastructure that you need. You won't have to run as big as server clusters. It will make your app more efficient. You'll need less developers. It'll be easier to maintain. It'll be more accessible to find the right developers, because you don't actually need to have a trained developer. What I mean by trained is that you don't have to have a developer that's trained to code Nexus or blockchain to develop on Nexus. You just, as long as the API or the developer has dealt with an API, RESTful, which REST stands for representative state transfer. We're not a complete REST API, but we're RESTful, right? It's similar, a JSON REST API, which is a pretty common format and interface for people to use. Then it becomes really, really easy for you to get talent. I mean, there was a huge, I think there still is a pretty large developer vacuum, and the cost of getting, a smart contract developer can be pretty substantial. And then you have all these additional issues on top of that, such as, let's say, MetaMask, where, you have key management. Well, I want to receive my NFT, but I can't download the whole Ethereum blockchain. Now, can I? There's no Ethereum light nodes, and I want to do it in my web browser. Okay, well, I'm going to have to use this plugin called MetaMask that has a username and password, which is a centralized authentication system for a decentralized system, which doesn't really make much sense. And there's already been censorship of MetaMask accounts. If anybody's seen that, I think the Tornado Cash guy, they froze some of his MetaMask funds, which means like it's this another form of an exchange. You don't really have your coins in custody anymore. And one of the primary ethos of crypto is not your keys, not your crypto, right? That's really important to remember, is if you don't have the actual private keys yourself, then it's not actually yours. You don't ever have those coins. So we want, with Nexus, you don't need to worry about all those things anymore, because you still get the same type of interface, username, password, and PIN, and that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. People are working on alternatives, like you can use like an SSH key and like passwordless login, but you just create another set of problems when you do that, because, okay, well, now you don't have to remember your username and password, but what happens if your hard drive crashes or you lose your key? Okay, well, then you're gonna have to keep a backup on your key server. Okay, well, if you keep a backup on the key server, what happens if the key server gets hacked? Now everybody's accounts are compromised, right? So we're working on that, and this is what I was just touching on last week too, about login with Nexus, where you'll basically, if anybody's ever done the 2-factor authentication for Google, if you log into your Google Gmail account and say, hey, what do you need to authenticate you? Go check this specific, the YouTube app, and then click yes. So you go into the YouTube app and it pops up, hey, this whatever app wants to log in, is this okay? Did you do this? And you click yes. So think of that. That's how the login with Nexus will work, right? In your mobile wallet. That's not coming out in 5.1, but that's coming out in 5.2 as far as a remote login. So that somebody will be able to actually directly talk to your device from the web apps, so that you remove the attack surface from the actual central server to more decentralized nodes. And then you actually offload some of your computing too, because the cumbersome, more computationally intensive work will be done actually on the person's mobile device, right? So that's a really important feature that I think is going to really help bring a lot of people into the developer ecosystem a lot more. And we're targeting, like I said, more web-based stuff, right? We're not going in and, how should I say it? We're not going in and trying to create this whole new whatever, like, hey, this is my new DeFi stuff, I think there's a certain value to like non-fungible tokens, but really a lot of crypto is pretty speculative, right? We're focusing on concrete technologies that we know have actually been created, that we know themselves exist, right? That's a really, really important distinction, because we don't have to go out and create this whole new developer ecosystem, and we also don't need to go out and create a whole set of new issues. To solve, we go in and we solve what's already existing better, right? People need to log in, people need to have authentication, people need to have all these specific different things. So that's a really important part of the framework, right? So anyway, yeah, the login with Nexus is a really important part. So instead of going out and creating all these new speculative technology, speculating, oh, people are going to use this new platform, right? Like, one thing, so social media, we're working on established things, established protocols, established things that we need, right? Phishing is a huge issue. Phishing, as far as creating a fake login page and using the username and password there, and then essentially being able to log in with someone else's credentials, because they actually put the credentials in your fake page. So verifying the authenticity of these, these sites, right? Well, you won't have phishing anymore when you have a login with Nexus, because you just type in your username into that specific thing, into that app, and then it'll send a message to your phone to say, hey, do you authorize this specific app to access your SIG chain? And you're not actually giving them anything. And that's the beautiful part about it. You're sending them a signature that verifies that you're actually the owner of that specific account identity, but and they can read your SIG chain, but they don't have your credentials. You're not putting any credentials, and you're not actually typing any credentials into any web form. You're not sending any data from your computer to another server, right? Which anytime you have that, you have potential for man-in-the-middle attacks. You have potential for phishing. You have all these other security constraints. And there's really nothing you can do about phishing. I mean, there's some things you can do, obviously, like you verifying your domain identity, but people don't notice those things as much. And so the web browsers have kind of taken to helping with that. Oh, this is reported, this is a suspicious site, blah, blah, blah. But I figured, the best option is to remove the potential for that to even happen, instead of trying to fluff around the outside and make it work better. We're doing a new method, right, where you just type in, and it's already a pretty well established system where you can log in with Google or you can log in with Facebook. So it's not going to be something new and scary for people. It's going to be like, oh, log in with Nexus. What's that? Oh, okay, there's a SIG chain thing. Okay, I'm going to download this mobile wallet app. Okay, and log in. And when we get to the login with Nexus side, we'll most likely be having multiple apps associated with it. So you'll have your Nexus wallet, but if you don't want to use the Nexus wallet per se, you download an authenticator like app, right, which will allow you to manage your credentials, or like a password manager. So at the very minimum, you can use Nexus kind of like a hardware password manager, and you won't even really need to know it is a blockchain. That's the beautiful part. Not to say that we don't want to have people understand that and communicate that, but we're not leading with like blockchain, because we've been around, man. I mean, if anybody wasn't aware, I developed a lot of the Nexus framework through feedback from some of the bigger companies in the world. We were talking to a lot of people, and they were all really, really interested in what we're doing specifically, because the running industry standards have been Hyperledger or Quorum, right? And that's the most people were really aware of, but they had a lot of issues, so most people really couldn't get past MVP. And so I spent a lot of time sampling and saying, okay, well, what do you see a blockchain as? What would your ideal use of a blockchain be? And I use that to kind of model our list of requirements that really went into designing the Tritium protocol to what it is now, right? So everything we do with a specific purpose, even the satellite routing system, right? I've been testing that architecture out in the Wolf Den for a number of years. I go to the IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, and do presentations there, and they would try to chew me up and spit me out and eat me alive, but I could hold myself down. I could hold it with all of them. For anybody that's not familiar, it's kind of the Wolf Den, because these are all like the old engineers from Cisco, from all these big internet companies that come here and they set the new standards, right? So there's a lot of ego, and a lot of these guys are old. They've been around the block. They've been coding for 40 years. They've been doing a lot of network stuff, and they definitely don't take too kindly to, you know, young guys coming in there and telling them how much better you could do it. But I managed to do that, and you know, that's where, you know, a lot of this architecture that we have developed has come from, you know, talking with people and putting it to the tests, and you know, putting it out into the walls essentially, and seeing what they do and how much they chew and spit out. So you know, that's the routing protocol. Now the Tritium protocol itself, again, was developed with those similar things in mind, right? So it's become a really nice, powerful framework. I don't know if I could list everything off the top of my head of what's been done, because I'm sure I would miss some things. But there's a lot of new functionality in it. You know, one of the really cool parts of it I'm still pretty proud of is the searching functionality, right? Typically, if you want to have search functionality on the blockchain, you have to scrape the entire blockchain and dump it into a MySQL database and all of that. Now it's just all done on, right? And you have operators too. So like, for instance, you could run a query, or you could run a command to say, I want to list all of my transactions for my SIG chain, but I want to list only the ones that are dealing with Nexus, right? All of my credits per se. I want to list all of my credits, and then I want to sum all of that, and then I want to put it within a date range. Say, you know, where it's greater than this date and where it's less than this date. And based on that, like, boom, you've got the sum that tells you exactly how much Nexus was credited over those periods of time, all done right in the API. Generally, you'd have to have that done externally, right? So this is just one of the many things that make it really simple to develop on now. And it's really highly efficient. And the way I designed it in C++, which is the language Nexus is coded in, is one of the faster languages. So having everything done in C is going to make everything else trickle down and be easier for developers. So like jQuery is a really powerful framework that people use to develop, you know, web-based, you know, JavaScript. Think of Nexus as being like that, but for the back end, right? It's like a one-stop shop for all your back end stuff. I'm going to be adding a database service, as I was talking about, which will deploy as a standalone, but there's going to be an LLD API as well. So you'll be able to actually access and create your own database instances on that specific local node. Or, you know, when we get to the later version, you'll be able to create a replicated database cluster, right? It's designed to automatically do all these things, because I personally, I'm a fairly proficient software engineer, and I don't like to configure servers. I'm even trying to set up like an open VPN. I mean, there's so many little things that you got to do just right. And, you know, some people make scripts and stuff like that. But I think, you know, I don't know, computers weren't proactively designed. And, you know, you can't proactively design the internet and computers unless you know how people are going to really use it. So, you know, people like Dino and all of them that really designed and built a lot of the internet, you know, didn't anticipate some of the things to happen right now, right? The internet was designed with these, you know, honesty really was a requirement for it to function, in the staying as an open system. But now that we've seen the last like 20, 30 years now, I think of really a lot of adoption of the internet. I think where it's 2 or 3 billion people in the world now have access to the internet. It's become really apparent the parts that are lacking and the parts that aren't, and that's kind of what Nexus is it's looking at all of these architectural issues and, you know, saying, you know, proactively, you know, what needs to be to make, you know, the internet really go to the next level. And that's where I was talking about this last AMA about having a decentralized hosting, where you can one click and now you fired up a web server, right, that can host a file for you, or, you know, just modify a name and now you have a DNS record. just log into this sig chain and, the just button is what Ernest Hancock says. It's just, you just do this. And that's what we're developing for developers too, a just button. And Mike from BEF is a really good example of what you can do. He has no coding experience. He doesn't have any, he's a smart guy, don't get me wrong, but he's not super technically inclined. He's worked for consulting firms, and he's got a lot of business acumen, but he's more of a businessman than you could say he's a developer. He developed a full carbon credits trading app, markets, auctions, all of that without touching code, because Nexus is just doing all that heavy lifting for him. He has, sometimes he has challenges compiling the node. That's how technically illiterate he is, but he built the dApp on Nexus. And that's a really powerful idea, because there's so many people that have these ideas that they want to bring to life, and you never know what's going to be the next $1 million idea. But, it requires, if you try to hire a developer firm to assess even building your app idea, you'll get quotes. You're lucky if you get a quote for 20 grand. You're going to get quotes of 6 figures or more. I know some a former business partner of mine that wanted to start an exchange. He raised $2 million to start the exchange, and he spent close to that, and they still didn't finish it. They still didn't get it to market. And that's another, issue with coders, is it just, you never know what you're going to get, right? It's like Forrest Gump, life's a box of chocolates. So sometimes, you could hire a firm that you think was going to be good because you're paying a lot of money, and you're just paying a lot of money for, dibwads. So, that's another thing that really Nexus provides, is it removes people's reliance so much on these sophisticated developers, and it allows you to do a lot of these high functioning systems without really being marred with the need to constantly monitor, get really talented quote unquote developers. Not to say you don't want talented developers, but Nexus does that for you, right? It makes all of these things really, really simple for you. The process of creating an NFT is you just type in something on a web browser, type in a URL, boom, now you've got an NFT. Type in another URL, and now you've got a tokenized asset. Type in another URL, and now you've got a login system. It's really, really powerful, because it does a lot with requiring very little from the developer or from the user. And that's really what I define as advancement, or one aspect of advancement in technology, is if it can do a lot without requiring much of you. That's a powerful technology. A lot of times people mix it up, and they think, well, if the complexity of the functionality is greater, then therefore it's more advanced. And that's not necessarily true. You do it as simple as possible, and you keep it as simple as possible. But no more simple, right? No simpler. You want to keep it as simple as possible, but no more simple. So everything is looking really good. It's been really stable. I got the everything's templated. So I've kind of coded away the need for a full-time API coder, right? That's kind of one of the ways that I pivoted when, that Paul and the Australian embassy decided to close. It resulted from a lot of negligence in the actual code base, and then so that's what really took me the last year to untangle. But I figured in the process of it, I would develop a lot of new features that would help improve the functionality. So overall, I would on an old core, I'd try to do list invoices, for instance. And I'd be waiting for 35 or 45 seconds before I'd get a response back on the old, code from Paul. Now it's within a few seconds, right? So it's magnitudes and orders of magnitudes more capable and more functional. So the API really is gotten to a standard that I feel really comfortable with now. I also wrote query DSL now, or not query DSL, sorry, contract DSL, conditional contract DSL. DSL stands for domain specific language. So that's done. It's rough, right? But I just wrote it to be able to debug conditional contracts a little bit better. So if you're an API, or if you're a developer and you're listing transactions or contracts, you'll see a new field in there called conditions. And then that's the actual code that's being run on the conditional virtual machine. So the Nexus does have the ability to code in the virtual machine like you can with Ethereum, but we've not exposed that to developers because of all the issues we've seen with developers doing things that they don't fully understand yet. So that's why we're creating these sets of templated API commands that have these different contracts that we know are standardized and we know are correct, so that you really kind of got a toolbox even as a regular user to connect and access all of these things, and you don't really need all these complex coders, right? We handle a lot of that for you. So that's I think that's one thing that really distinguishes us from a lot of other projects, is we're focusing in a different way, so we don't really have the same wave or levels of competition, right, as other people are. A lot of people are chasing bridges and NFTs and DeFi, and like crypto has these interesting cycles it goes through. We're focusing on the rest of the world. What does the world need, and how can we provide that for the world? And when you create the ability for more everyday people to develop web apps when they don't have money, you create a really powerful effect, because now you're creating economic value where there wasn't economic value before. And with money and resources becoming more scarce for a lot of people these days, all of these different things will make a huge difference for you. And then just the efficiency of the node and how it runs really helps reduce your actual infrastructural costs as well. So that's pretty much where I'm at. By the next AMA, I'm pretty sure we'll have a new wallet release out with this new 5.1 core, a new beta for the mobile wallet, which will include all of the, the 5.1 features. I'm running in it right now. It's running in an older version before I took over and revamped the entire API. So we're just about ready to get that back. Like I said, I got the hybrid mode done now. That's all running and debugged. I've got through all the bug lists. I don't have any bugs currently as it stands. I tracked down a couple of the interesting ones the last few days. And then, like I said, I'm moving to just polish the client mode and legacy related stuff, such as the managing the clients, and we need to have notifications for split dividends, because we want to make sure that you can still get your split tokens and have the full functionality minus staking in client mode. So it's just as secure as a full node, the client node or the light node, and it still has all of the same functionality. The only thing you can't do is produce blocks, because in order to produce blocks, you have to have the whole transaction set. In order to have the whole transaction set, you need the whole blockchain, right? So that it's not ever going to be possible to stake on a light device, just because of security as well, right? We've considered some of those ideas in the past, and like having some sort of pooled staking inside the mobile wallet, but we don't want to rely too much on like trusted nodes and stuff like that. So I also got the DNS seeds updated. We got a peer group. If you want to join, if you have a server that you're running in a data center anywhere, just create some DNS entries and shoot me a message, and we'll give you an invite into the seed nodes group. The more the merrier. The more nodes we have people running, the better off the network infrastructure will be, the more resilient it will be. So if you decide you want to do that, or you're already doing that, let me know and we'll get you added into the DNS seeds. So everybody knows what the DNS seeds are. They're domain addresses, domain names, that when your node has never talked to any node, it's a fresh wallet, doesn't know who's who, where, they have no idea where Nexus is, right? Because Nexus is, it's just a bunch of IP addresses, right? You don't know any of those IP addresses, so you do a domain lookup and you connect to those nodes, and those are what are called seed nodes. And those seed nodes will then say, okay, here's the last 10,000 or 1,000 accounts that I've connected to, and I'm going to pass them to you. And then that allows you to start making connections to them. And another thing that the seed nodes do is they seed the unified time samples. So if anyone wasn't aware, Nexus clocks are all synchronized to each other to the second through a decentralized clock synchronization protocol I call unified time, that I developed in early 2014. If anybody was watching Ethereum 2.0, if you remember the testnet is split, that was from a clock synchronization issue that they had because they were using what's called network time protocol, and they didn't know about how clocks worked, because on a computer your clock doesn't see a second the same. Like micro voltage oscillations in your CPU can cause that quartz crystal to vibrate slightly different and give you a slightly different measurement on the ticks. And temperature also has an effect on it. So, over time, over a month or two, your clocks will start to drift from one another, 1 or 2, 5, 10 seconds. So your operating system will synchronize to an atomic clock usually, and then change your timestamp. And if you're not monitoring that, then your clock's going to change 10 seconds, and then now your offset's not going to recognize the new time. And that's kind of what happened with Ethereum. What created a split. But network time protocol is a centralized clock synchronization protocol. So I'm kind of curious. We'll see how that all plays out for them. Because if you pollute the time server and the time samples, then you can pollute a lot of the other aspects of the network. So that's Seed Nodes. Anybody wants to join, let me know. It's been really cool to see so much support from the community and how many people are already stepping up to do it. So if you want to keep stepping up, that would be awesome. I'm going to run through some questions. Let me see. Questions, Robert. Two-factor authentication. Okay, so let me try to explain this again, Robert, with the 2FA. Just take 2FA and take it out of your brain just for a minute. Just 2FA, not in here. Okay, let's focus on the ledger virtual machine. Okay, so think of that as a ledger level authentication system where you have and or logic, just like a conditional contract, right? Is Boolean logic, which means it's a contract that has to evaluate to true, such as, hey, you can't spend this for 1 day, so if it's before that 1 day time, it's going to return false until after that day, then it'll return true. So the ledger level virtual machine is going to allow you to do that, but with cryptographic primitives, okay? And it'll create access control schemes, access control patterns. So 2FA is one pattern, okay, if that makes sense. The 2FA, two-factor authentication, is one pattern that you can develop. Just like we're going to have templated contracts for conditional contracts, you'll have templated ledger level virtual machine contracts too, or authentication patterns. Okay, so you'll have, if you want 2FA, you'll choose the 2FA authentication pattern, and then it'll set that up. But this ties in with crypto wells too, because what you'll be able to do is in this authentication pattern, you'll be able to set certain values, such as, hey, I can't spend this coin for a year. If my sig change is inactive for a year, then this account gets unlocked to this new set of credentials. So what you'll be able to do is create backup sets of credentials, or give people access to a subset. You could create an account in your sig chain for your kids' allowance, and allow your kids, give them a set of credentials that allows them to access just that account with the certain stipulations that you specify. So the 2FA is kind of a subset of this larger generic virtual machine that will be really powerful. It's going to create an and or logic. So you can create your 2FA access pattern, and then you could create an or, and then do like a crypto will, and then you could do another or and say these three people can claim this after 2 years of inactivity or something, which would be like, hey, I died, my sig chain's inactive. Okay, well then the funds in it are going to automatically be transferred or accessible by the recipients or the beneficiaries, right? So that's why I think generic and template. So when you give a request of like two-factor authentication, I don't write a hard-coded two-factor authentication system. I think, okay, let's develop this as a generic programming language so that we can program our access control where 2FA can be one of those specific programs. So the way it's going to work with 2FA, Robert, is you have your primary key. The way it works now is you hash your public key, and that gives you your next hash. So when you claim the transaction, you have to produce the public key that actually generated that hash, and then a valid signature from that. And that's how you claim your sig chain right now. That's the authentication pattern. It's just one-to-one there. With the virtual machine, what it's going to do is it's going to have an and. So you'll have two hashes. You'll say this hash and this hash. Okay. Each one of those hashes will be the hash of a public key. Okay. Each of these public keys will be on separate devices. The public keys will be generated via credentials. Okay. So if you have an authenticator OTP style, you'll have a QR code you scan, and then that will give you the data that uses as a random seed to generate all of your keys, right? So when you generate a transaction on your desktop wallet, you type your username, your password, and your PIN number, and then it's going to create that transaction, and then it's going to broadcast that to the network as a partial transaction, and then your mobile wallet will pick that up, right? Or you can even just peer-to-peer it and say, okay, I need to sign. So think of it as like a multi-signature key, multi-signature authentication pattern. And that's another thing that you do with these access patterns. You could do infinite numbers of ands, this hash and this hash and this hash and this hash. Now it takes 5 people to sign for any transaction to be processed, right? So it becomes a type of multi-factor authentication, programmable, where your 2FA, your second form of authentication, is a separate key, right, on a separate device, and so you'll be able to manage that through your actual mobile wallet or an authenticator like app eventually. But that's coming closer to 6.0, because in order to do that, you need to do a hard fork. We need to update the source code to basically end the whole consensus rules, because currently the consensus rules only support the hash of the public key for the authentication. Dead man's switch, I touched on that, Mark. That ties in with the whole authentication patterns, and that's how you can add additional recoveries. So you could say, hey, this hash and SigChain, inactive, no transactions for a year, would allow this hash to access it, but this hash can't access it before that time. So that way you can securely give out credentials to, let's say, your wife, in case you die, but she won't be able to access and steal your money until you're actually dead, or until you don't spend your money for a year, right? So that's kind of how the crypto will stuff will work, and that's just how the authentication pattern will work. Like I said, that's a program. That's one of the programs in this ledger level virtual machine, and then the other crypto will, or the two-factor authentication, is another program. Okay, bump. In Australia, the last few weeks, there have been multiple major companies hacked, personal data of millions of people stolen. Medibank, Opus, Energy Australia. How Nexus can fix the problem? Well, one thing that it can do is not actually having these services hold your data, but there's there's an incentive with that. But I touched earlier, as I was talking about login with Nexus, that basically is going to remove your actual authentication credentials from them on their server cluster. The file system will help a lot with this, because the file system will essentially allow you to store your files in a distributed environment, but allow you to give access and control to them. So let's say like your private medical records, that should never be stored on any central servers, and that's really what we need to do, is set a different precedence, Bob, because as more and more people continue to give their data, it's just going to get stolen, it's going to get hacked, or it's going to get sold, right? We cannot trust large companies with their data. So Nexus, what it does is it pulls that need away from that developer and from that app, which helps a lot with development costs. You don't have to worry about all this GDPR stuff, like it's all handled, and it gives you authentication and encryption. So you encrypt your files, and then if you want to reveal your specific file, you pass that to someone else. Now with the crypto API, it'll allow that all to happen, where as a developer, you can just literally in Bubble, you can make an encrypted app, which is just unheard of. People already now have a hard enough time making an encrypted app, like not in Bubble right now. Imagine you could do that in Bubble. So keeping the data more locally bound. So the way the file system will work is you just pay Nexus into this file system to store that, not in your actual central servers. Other reasons, other things that Nexus can do to help with that, the operating system, that's, can be used to replace a LAMP stack eventually, so that you have a hack-resistant operating system. If you do happen to have some sort of, system where you're holding people's data, that's another thing that can help a lot. But the biggest thing we want to do is we want to help people realize not your keys, not your crypto, not your data, right? Like if you don't have your data or you don't have direct access to it, it's not your data, and they're going to sell it, right? So we need to really minimize that a lot. And I think the more that people have personal information stolen and hacked, the less people are going to try to use these services if there's alternatives present. Right now, there's not too many alternatives, so people will keep using them. But as we provide and build more of these alternatives, I think that's really going to help substantially. Jacob, as far as we can see, Ethereum become censorable. 50% of Ethereum blocks are OFAC compliant. How is Nexus choosing free or censor? Well, one way that we do it is through pure Nakamoto consensus. So what that means is it's a probabilistic consensus algorithm, not a deterministic. Deterministic means like I can predict in the future what's going to be. Probabilistic means it's just you don't know. It's based on probabilities. So Ethereum, as far as their proof of stake consensus, it's more deterministic. You have a slot, and you know all of the validators and their coins and stuff like this. Nexus, it's probabilistic. You don't guarantee, you don't get a guarantee that you're going to get a block in 5 minutes if you have enough coins in your wallet. It's probabilistic. It's just going to happen when it's going to happen. So that probabilities, this probabilistic nature of the consensus algorithm is one thing that helps, because you censor what you can predict, right? If you can control what something is going to become, or what it will be in the future, then you can censor that, right? Ethereum really has censored their chain. If you guys remember when they did the DAO, I believe, after they censored that contract, that's when the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance emerged, right? JP Morgan Chase endorsed them after that and was like, oh man, it's this new revolutionary technology, which was to me, it showed that the developers were willing to censor their chains so that they were corruptible. And then, from there comes like all the goods. We're like, hey, buddy, well, how about you work with us? So, Ethereum really is kind of designed as a censored chain. And their proof of stake system, I'm not sure how much they really designed it to be the way that it is, but it seems like just a concentration of wealth. Mining is more probabilistic, so it's harder to control. But once you can control the consensus and all the consensus validator nodes, you can censor what happens or what doesn't happen on the chain, right? You can control that entirely, even if they're valid events. You can still keep someone, which really gives you the ultimate result of freezing someone's account. If you can never move your funds because all the validators just reject your transactions, even though there's no core consensus rule against that, then you have censorship. So making things more probabilistic is one way that we make it, censorship resistant. And then encryption, obviously, and decentralization. Decentralizing things as much as possible, I think, is a really important component to that. Because when there's a central point to corrupt, then that's what they usually use to get people censored. You corrupt the central point, right? Vitalik or anything else, and that's kind of what we're seeing with Ethereum. So, we're learning from those mistakes that they've made and making sure that we don't make them ourselves. Roland, we know quantum computers to be a threat, but how could it be beneficial if used with good intentions? No. So, first, to start off, quantum computers have not reached quantum supremacy yet. That means that the quantum computer is supreme at calculating something over. There's a few algorithms and a few things that it's managed to do faster, but so far there's no quantum memory. They have to use just qubits as registers, really. That's one of the requirements of Shor's algorithm. You have to have like a certain number of qubits that you use as your just registry, because a registry is kind of like where you put a value to, hey, I need to add 5 plus 5, or you need to store the two values you need to add somewhere, and those are stored in registers in your CPU. And then the instruction is, hey, add register A to register B and store it in register C. And that's generally how it works. So quantum computers are really kind of like that. They're like an ASIC. They're not universal yet. They've worked on some sort of universal chips, but really the fundamental thing with quantum computers is that they do solve some of these conventionally, classically difficult algorithms in polynomial time, where they normally would be exponential time, more iterations in the number of atoms in the universe, that type of complexity down to like, oh, hey, like a few billion, not much, or a few million. That's a big difference in the actual complexity of the algorithm. So, they won't really do anything for mining. I've seen a lot of people talk about mining being, a quantum computer can only solve a cryptographic hash, in half of the time, right? It cuts the bit length in half. So a 256-bit classically secure hash is only 128 bits quantum resistant, right? Which is still plenty. To 123 bits is more, more iterations than you could count in the known age of the universe, right? So that's they're really kind of quite, how should I say it? They don't really have much practical application. AIs, they have a lot of application for AIs for some specific algorithms that do break cryptography, but I think it's going to take at least a few more decades before we start seeing quantum computers being used out in the real world and practical applications in ways that are supreme to the classical computer. The big thing that we really, is the big thing immediately right now is just making sure that our encryption is resistant to quantum computers because it's not retroactive, right? Every one of your keys is not retroactive. So you can't go back to tell Satoshi, hey, Satoshi, can you move some of your coins out of your old addresses, because you got exposed public keys, he can't. If he's not around, he's not around. And that's that, those coins still can be released and dumped on the market, right? So we're focusing on that now, right? So that we don't have that problem in the future. But quantum computers really aren't they have applications in more of like the obscure types of computing, like solving integer factorization or discrete logarithms or crunching AI stuff. I think our brains are somewhat quantum computers. You have the sodium potassium channels. I think our neurons can have some sort of quantum superposition going on with photons and maybe the sodium channels. And I'm not as familiar with the neural architecture, but I think there's something going on there. And so I really think the biggest thing that we're going to see from quantum computers is artificial intelligence is going to take a huge leap forward, because just with the classical computers, I just don't think that they're capable of all of the processing. I mean, we may not be able to add all these crazy numbers in our heads, right? Like the same way that your calculator can do, and that's led us to this belief that machines are somewhat superior. But I mean, the capability to process and see abstract thought, it takes a lot of power. It takes a lot. I think our brains are a lot more powerful than we give credit for. But quantum computers really don't expect them or anticipate them to increase transactions per second or anything like that. No, they really just break stuff right now, right? And they'll enhance artificial intelligence, and they're changing the way that we have to see computers too. Now we know that there's this new way of computing, but like I said, there's no quantum memory, there's no quantum RAM. There's no quantum disks, and there's none of that yet. It's like just a simple little quantum processor, which is starting to happen. And that it seems in some ways like it's Microsoft released a language called Q, like the Q for quantum language, right? And it's running on classical computers. Obviously, they're trying to just get people used to these quantum algorithms. I mean, I don't think the everyday regular developer is really going to see much of a difference. You have to get into some really complex, really strange type of computing to really start to see a quantum computer excel, at least as it stands now. In the future, 100, 200 years, sure, I could see that as a standard. If you're talking about like how we could utilize quantum superposition and entanglement in the future, Roland, then that would be a huge step. This is something that I actually just started talking about at the IETF. I remember the last IETF I was at. Everyone was just like, "Whoa, bandwidthless, no latency communication. Whoa, that's crazy." And what that really means is that if you have superposition, you can have two atoms superimposed, or no, entangled. So the problem with entanglement, though, here's the problem, is that you have to split them from the same location, right? You have to break them apart from the same spot. So you have to transport them across the universe. So that's just it's more science fiction than anything. But the idea of that is that you can have no latency communication. You don't have to travel. The wave doesn't have to travel. There could be potential other applications of gravitational waves, gravitic waves. Based off of orbits, gravitic waves have to act instantaneously on an object. I mean, it's still highly debated, but they have to act instantaneously on an object in order for it to maintain an orbit, right? So gravitic waves might be another way. But zero latency communication, that could potentially increase your throughput in the future. Everything like that. So, I wouldn't give it too much weight. Just look at quantum computers as they're really just reshaping the way that we have to look at cryptography and the one-way functions that we use to generate cryptography. That's the fundamental thing right now. And they're going to bring a lot of benefit to artificial intelligence algorithms in the near term, because that's what they're really being focused on, is breaking cryptography and artificial intelligence. And we'll see over time what more of their practical uses are, but I just, there's an atomic compare and swap instruction in your CPU, and people hardly ever use it, right? So, I'm predicting at some point that there's going to be, some crossover to classical computers and what we already do, but I don't think it's going to feel like a whole lot different once they really get here. I mean, you're going to have higher computation capabilities in certain areas, but in others not. In what version the tokens can be reprinted? You mean increasing the supply for the tokens? Supply increase in the tokens should be either a 6.0 or 7.0 thing. Right now, I mean, you can technically, we could add it in as a feature pretty quickly, but I want to think on the security a little bit more, because you don't want to have, I don't like the idea of, one person being able to create a token and then just print, a bunch more, unless there's some sort of consensus. So, I'd want there to be a consensus of some form. If you want to increase the token supply, like people that have that token should vote to some degree. You don't want to just have one person do its stock splits whenever they want, because it's just not really the dynamic that I'd really like to see. I want to see more DAOs rather than autocracies. Can we as individuals use hybrid chain to gain privacy features outside of the transparent chain? Yep. Anyone, Chris, you can do it. Just fire it up with -private and -password or -generate equals, and you got a private node. So that's usually what we use to develop on and test on, because it just produces blocks for you. You don't have to mine anything like that. Anyone can fire up their own hybrid network or their own private network to do whatever they want on it. And that's a really powerful feature, that it supports out of box, and that's something that we designed because we saw a direct need. Not everybody's going to want to develop on the public network. So, what security to change devices and everything IoT in a case of theft, loss of SIG chain? This is where you have the access patterns, Robert. So if you have your two sets of credentials, credential A and credential B, your 2FA, and you lose your 2FA device, well, SOL, right? Well, if you have access patterns, you could have, a certain recovery credential that allows you to change that specific 2FA device, right? You use your recovery phrase for that. What security to change devices and everything IoT in case of theft losses? I mean, the question is a little vague. Theft, loss of SIG chains. In case of a loss of SIG chains and a loss of devices, the way that the IoT is going to work for the second, IoTs is you're going to have, basically it's going to be a type of two-factor authentication. So in order to modify the state on the device, it's going to require the device level SIG chain, and it's going to require some sort of master SIG chain that is the controlling of that, and that's going to be controlled through your mobile app. So if you lose your IoT device, it doesn't compromise any security of anything, because it's only got half of what's needed, right? You need the other half in order to actually modify any of the states and to act in that accord, right? If that makes sense. Tell a bit more about the use cases you're developing yourself. There's a few of them. I just talked to a couple people today, had a really good conversation. We're working on some blockchain related stuff. We're developing a really cool service. Me, myself, working on geospatial markets. That's a big one, where basically you have a marketplace that's bound to a specific geographic area, and it allows people to discover each other, because that's really what a market does, is it allows people to discover one another and start to discuss with one another. So geospatial markets are really important, because, I mean, look at all the Netherlands farmers protests, right? There's lots of people. One of the ways that they squeeze farmers is where you can actually sell, right? So if you create a frictionless peer-to-peer, system where people can actually communicate with one another and discover each other and create all of these specific orders, then you have this new whole dynamic that's going to really open up, where people can start to think more locally. They can start to develop things locally. So I'm working on that and developing some type of, I guess, a framework and a toolkit for how we're going to manage these specific markets, right? How you're going to manage your products, how you're going to connect with people, how to create a grocery store, and it really is going to help. Like, I mean, one thing I learned, like in let's say Venezuela, for instance, people are starving. Why are people starving there? Well, I mean, the land is so fertile. Well, you can't grow anything that's not Monsanto, and Monsanto don't produce seeds, so you have to keep buying the Monsanto seeds, right? And you can't sell anything in a grocery store there as a farmer unless you're using Monsanto seeds, right? So they created this circular, layers of depriving people, essentially, where I really think that people need to be able to eat, right? And the earth is fertile. I mean, Ethiopia, is super fertile ground, but people are starving still. Why is that? Venezuela, it's super fertile, but people are starving, because these things are kind of engineered. So when we open up the capability to have some sort of associations, with one another and discover each other, we create, a whole new, area of opportunities, especially seeing whatever your opinion may be on COVID-19 and everything else like that, one thing we did notice though is that like guidelines, which are not laws, were enforced by corporations, such as grocery stores, right? There is no actual law. It's just guidelines. I mean, executive order is not a law. That's the legislature's job, right? So we have seen a lot of that, and that's kind of really the foundations of fascism, where the corporations or corporate interests enforce governmental desires without actually having it illegally based. So we need to sidestep all of that, right? And that'll allow people to start growing. Really, I want to see people growing more gardens, being more self-sufficient. So really like technologies that help, augment that. And then another one is the music platform. That's kind of my baby, where, basically kind of think of it as like a GitHub for musicians. There's a whole gig economy of like a drummer, for instance, has a recording studio. He will go look on Craigslist looking for people that need a drummer, and then he'll record a drum track, and then he'll get some of the royalties from that song. That happens all the time, especially with drummers. So this will be kind of like a gig economy platform where you can discover each other and collaborate in kind of a decentralized way, and then also share rights in those royalties. So if you're a drummer, you propose your drum track to this specific individual, and after it gets accepted, then you receive some of those tokens associated with that, and you get paid. And so you don't need to really trust each other. You don't have any enforcement issues. And so another aspect of it too will be tokenizing music and art. So instead of it just being like, hey, here's an NFT about Bored Ape, or an NFT of Jack Dorsey's first tweet, woo, yeah, nobody cares. You can be like, hey, here's the song, Let It Be by the Beatles. This is valued at this much because it's on a free market, right? The market will obviously be the Nexus peer-to-peer marketplace. So you can have this decentralized exchanging of these tokens, and then it allows, new musicians to say, hey, I need to crowdsource this album. It's going to take me, 6 months. I need, so much money to actually release and create this album. Here I'm selling 10% of the tokens that represent the ownership of this album to you to be able to utilize, and boom, you got it. And then, that's going to be tied together under a specific legal structure. We're firing up a bunch of those. It's called the Private Membership Association. That's one way that we're actually able to protect ourselves legally, especially in satellite stuff. So then another one is serious technology and research. That's basically my garage, which is my lab right now. That's where I'm doing all the strange, research with, electric propulsion systems. I'm studying gravity, studying high voltage systems, studying resonance, mainly focused on propulsion and energy and communication are the three main things. But ideally, I would like to see in the future backyard inventors that have come up with things be able to find ways to get funding. It's really difficult to make your way with a disruptive technology because we don't have distribution networks and we don't have funding mechanisms. So this will allow people to crowdfund that. And that's how the satellites are going to work too. When we launch, Nexus, just, I'm not like building this entire constellation like Elon and putting 10,000 satellites up and getting all the money to do it. No. We're developing a framework that will allow it to proliferate itself and build itself, right? We'll have a crowdfunding of the first, orbital ring, obviously, where you'll own a piece of that, right? And then that will generate revenue based on people utilizing it. And then more people will deploy satellites of their own, right? And then they'll purchase a specific orbital real estate, and then that will be required in order to deploy the satellite, so that people will start investing in that, right? And it'll come in with so many other benefits too, such as like an example would be, I have an imaging sat, but I don't have all the onboard memory, or I'm not going to always have total ground coverage to store. Well, boom, now you have this constellation you can just plug in, and you can download the images into that file system, and then make them accessible to the ground by paying a fee. So think of it as kind of like an AWS in low Earth orbit. Where it provides these types of cloud functionalities, but also routing functionalities for you. And so those are the main use cases that I specifically am working on. I found them really, really valuable. They're just the things that I'm personally pretty passionate about. I'm working on another interesting project too with, I won't touch too much into it, but using, how should I say it? This is something that's based off of my my lady's work. We're basically like finding ways to restore harmony in our minds, our neural harmony through different geometries and stuff. So that's based off these really interesting matrices and stuff that I've been digging up. So that's something that you'll probably see evolving over time too, where as these show different relationships between things that can start to be harvested in ways like creating coils, or for instance, feng shui is based off of these, which is a spatial organizational protocol that's been around for thousands of years. So that's another thing that is kind of on the side that I do kind of for fun, testing it out right now. I've been finding some really fascinating effects. Yeah, some biohacks. So yeah, we got kind of lots of things going on. Yeah, I like to kind of have my fingers dipped in different things because I like to keep myself busy. Let's see. Someone steals your sig chain and has access to everything, and you can't change it. Is there a reset? That's what I meant. Yeah, that's what your recovery phrase is, Barbara. If you lose your sig chain credentials, you just use your recovery phrase and you recover it right there. Other remedies are putting stipulations on specific accounts. So, one such example would be you put all of your money in a trust that only allows you to withdraw 10,000 Nexus a day, let's say, and you put 10 million Nexus in there or whatever. That will prevent somebody from being able to drain your accounts immediately. You don't really have a need to drain 10 million Nexus all at once. You're fine with taking 100 days or whatever to drain a certain large sum out of it. But that way you basically don't need banks anymore, because like the banks are really functioning to provide a protection against theft, right, and somewhat insurance. This way, boom, like you can yell at me, you can put a gun to my head, and it still ain't gonna change the math, right? It ain't gonna change the cryptography. There's no way you can actually get that money out if it's locked in a contract, even if you have the sig chain credentials, because that contract will be locked even from you, right? So you can create that, or you can have second sets of credentials, and then those credentials have certain access patterns in the sig chain. So that's one of the many ways. Recovery phrase, putting your coins in specific locked accounts. Maybe your main hot credentials that you use most of the time are associated with your limited account usage, and then you maybe have a master set of credentials that doesn't have those limitations that you keep in a safe spot or something like that. There's lots of different options, and that's why the virtual machine for the ledger is going to be really important for improving that security. A satellite itself, as they stand right now, they're about 50 to 100,000 for the satellite itself, but that price is getting lower and lower. They're actually starting to find too that as you get below a certain number of nanometers, as the transistors get smaller. There was a point where bigger transistors worked better, and as they got smaller, then they started having more radiation interference. But we got past a point where they kind of hit this inflection where they're small enough now that they're not getting hit as much with radiation. So I suspect over the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to see them getting much cheaper. And that's one thing that we're going to be working on too with our satellite design, is finding ways to make them very cheap, very hardened, and even getting our launch costs low, which that's why I'm studying and developing new types of propulsion systems that potentially in the future could help with many other things other than just the satellite launches. Is any other questions? We've got, let's see, that's been about a bit over an hour. Is making the LOD into an API a big task? No, it actually isn't. The low-level database, the big task was getting the engine itself done. But since I created the API, I'll template it and stuff. It's really just a bit of copying and pasting, to be honest. It's like, I'd say like making the API, depending on like a few days maybe. It took close to a year to get the constant time database working, right? Just because it is so complex, and you're iterating. Low-level stuff becomes really complex, but we've spent 8 years building all this stuff to build stuff with, right? So we're kind of getting to that point now where it's just like drag and drop for me. Like a lot of the core functional lower level stuff is set, those foundation stones, and it's just plug here, and I got a new LOD API. Do I see any threats to Nexus? Something from side, more about government regulation? No, I'm not too concerned about that government regulation stuff, because we're sufficiently decentralized. We're a decentralized project. If we were centralized, I would be concerned. If there was, like if it was all like just, like if I was the, CEO or whatever in control of everything. Like there could potentially be some issues, but since we're sufficiently decentralized, what's interesting is it short circuits the legal system, the current legal system. And I've talked with a lot of really proficient lawyers about this. I can't remember what her name was, Sue, I think. She was from Baker or something. But she was kind of laughing, saying that like all these lawyers and stuff, they don't know what to do because the legal system right now is based on authority and accountability. He who is accountable has authority, right? So the CEO of a company is accountable to everyone, or not to everyone, to the legal. So somebody, one of their employees messes up, then the CEO is accountable, and so that gives the CEO the authority, right? When you have this decentralized system where there's no person to point at and say it's all your fault, the legal system short circuits on it, right? So, there's that, and then not developing anonymous cryptography immediately. That's a really important thing. As we saw Tornado Cash, the guy got arrested. And really, let's be honest, guys, like the only thing people use add-in coins for is to like launder money. I mean, let's just be honest. Like I think Zcoin, Zcash, like which is one of the more prominent anonymous coins, I think it barely uses any shielding, like 5 or 10% of the actual traffic is shielded. Everything else is open, so you can guess those 5 or 10% are being used for illicit activities. NSA has had botnets that have been mining crypto for a long time. So when you have, or mining Monero, sorry. So when you have these, anonymous cryptographies right now, you're actually kind of causing yourself more harm than good because you're just giving the NSA and CIA black budget money now, in ways to hide their money, and then drug dealers and cartels to launder it. And so, that's one reason why we focus on the transparent aspect first, rather than go into anonymous cryptography, because I did anticipate it becoming a problem in the future. And, not necessarily that it is a problem, but that it's a bat to beat you with, right? You don't want to give them any bats to beat us with. So, I've been minimizing that, exposure to that as much as possible. And, I've already been messed with quite a bit by governments and stuff. And, trying to demoralize or arrest or whatever, and it ain't gonna stop us. I mean, we're building this, man. We're still building, and I keep everything really squeaky clean. I follow the law. I don't speed. I'm really careful, about making sure that I do everything legally, because public figure, and we, a target. So we don't want to have too much of that. But I really think a lot of the affairs in the world, I think we're peripheral to that now. All the stuff that's happening in the world right now, I think, Nexus, is peripheral to that because there's a lot of bigger problems that they're having to focus on right now, that are causing them a lot more, strife than what we will. But there will be a point, as we get big enough that they're going to start to, go after us. And that's, why we have DAOs. The Starfish stuff, it protects against infiltration because we're going to get people that are infiltrate. So decentralization, developing the embassy models, like full on-chain DAO, hybrid networks, all this tech stack that we've built is here to help, protect against that too in the future, and protect people. And then another thing we're doing with private membership associations is it puts us in our own jurisdiction. If anybody want to check it out, you can look it up. There's about 70 Supreme Court cases that are protecting the privacy of private membership associations. So what it allows you to do is exist in your own jurisdiction where they can't mess with you. Like if anybody's ever been to like a cigar club, even in Arizona per se, you can still smoke in them. Why? Well, because they're private clubs. You're outside of state law. In dry counties where it's illegal to actually purchase, buy, and sell alcohol, you can still go to bars because they're private clubs. You can drink in a private club even if it's illegal in the state and county level. So those are other ways that we're going to create legal protections for us. Like serious technology and research will be under a PMA, and that's how we bypass securities laws. Same with the Synergy Project, platform that will be also inside a private membership association, so that we protect against that. So there's other aspects and facets too that we're doing to protect ourselves additionally. But those are the main characteristics. And we've come this far. Like I think the biggest threat would be is if we let the difficulties that we face demoralize us. That's I think we're the only ones that can really decide if we fail or not. If we decide to give up and become demoralized. But just remember, David brought down Goliath, right? It doesn't matter how big you are. Like things grow exponentially, so it may seem small now. But everything at one point started as just like a little stream. Even the big Mississippi just starts as this little teeny little drip up in the mountains of Minnesota. You know, I mean, this mighty, mighty river, you know, over time, things grow as they get bigger. So, you know, don't let them demoralize you. I think that's the biggest risk probably that we do face, is just letting these challenges demoralize us. I haven't let them demoralize me. I've let them inspire me, but I want to share that same, you know, wisdom with you guys too. Is don't let it bring you down. Like, look at these challenges as new opportunities for growth, rather than, oh, why is Ethereum existing with all this, and, you know, we're struggling and whatever. You know, don't think like that. Just think, you know, like, what are these opportunities that are being presented to us? What opportunities do we have now that we didn't have? You know, Satoshi would be delighted that we've managed to keep Nexus from blowing up for 8 years so that we could actually build it. Because if we blew up 4 years ago, we'd have a lot more difficulty. You think it's slow now, now adding all these additional factors to factor in, right? So we have a lot of advantages that we may not fully realize just yet. So yeah, just don't let the daunting task, the magnitude of the task at hand, deter you from doing it, right? We may not see the full fruition of all of this work that we do, you know, in the next, you know, in our lifetimes. But we're not here to see the fruition of it. We're here to get it seeded and started, so that, you know, our children can have a better life and a better world. And, you know, I mean, this is, you know, these are some of the last generations, I think, of the old way of living. I think the world is really waking up. And I'm not just talking about the common narratives, but, you know, I mean, people are starting to realize what reality is and what it isn't now, and, you know, how much we've been brainwashed and things like that. So yeah, just don't let things get you down. Like, you know, if you ever feel frustrated, or, you know, like you feel like you're losing hope, for one, don't have hope. Hope is bad magic, like hopium, right? You know, have faith, right? Hope is asking for a result, and it's always going to lead to disappointment. But faith is just knowing that, hey, I have faith that the work I'm putting in is going to always turn out for the best. Faith is that knowledge, that trust that, you know, life has the best intent for us. And even when things seemingly bad happen, they're always to bring us closer to that ideal result. Hope is just like, oh, wait, please save me. I'm hoping. You know, we got to save ourselves, right? So, you know, that I think is really the biggest challenge that we face, is just not to let the circumstances, you know, demoralize us, right? Like, and not let it become a reason to be like, oh, well, there's no hope, so I might as well not do anything. You know, like, if you feel that, do something. You know, do something. Like, go tell a friend, or come up with a DApp idea, or go talk to, you know, and, like, there's so many things that we could be doing. And get in that constructive mindset, it become really powerful. I'm already seeing a lot of network effect growing, which is really nice. People are starting to really help each other, and starting to see task force. So, you know, get more involved in the community, and that's what makes things grow exponentially, right? So, implementing Bitcoin Core. Okay, that's different, Chris. Developing an API, okay, is an application programming interface. Putting the LOD in Bitcoin is a totally different animal. I cannot give you a time figure on that. I have not looked at the Bitcoin code as it stands for quite a while. I don't know how deeply entrenched the level DB is. It should be just a one-stop shop, pretty quick drop in, but I can't guarantee on that. The standalone LOD API is different than the Bitcoin Core LOD, if that makes sense. What is the weakest point in Nexus? Can you compare what Nexus is better than Avalanche? Well, Avalanche is kind of funny. They started out, Emin Gunsider started out Avalanche with this white paper, and they were going to do directed acyclic graph, and it's going to scale everything. And then, like, oh wait, directed acyclic graphs don't work. Oh, you think, IOTA? I mean, I'm not. I mean, whatever. I mean, Avalanche I'll just say they have a CEO, so I mean, it's just whatever. It's not anything I'm impressed by. Like, it's typical corporate structure. You know, I mean, they did write a database to try to reach some of their scaling, you know, capabilities, and they're just, honestly, like, Emin Gunsider is their main CEO. I mean, he's so pompous. I do not like. I've watched his videos. I stay like, he's pretty much like another Charles Hoskinson. So we got Charles Hoskinson, and he's the wannabe Vitalik, and then we got Vitalik, who's the wannabe Satoshi. And then we got Satoshi, who's just a badass and doesn't even need to, like, show anybody who wants to be. And everybody's trying to be like him. And then you got Emin Gunsider, who's, like, late to the party but wanted to get in with Hoskinson. And they all have their platforms that are gonna destroy Ethereum. You know, anybody that builds their marketing on that is just, yeah. And anybody that takes this decentralized concept, this beautiful work of art that Satoshi gave us, and throws a CEO on it, like, it's whatever. But weakest points, I don't really like to compare if Nexus is better or not. I can just tell you my perspective, right? You can decide what you think Nexus is. Nexus is different. We function to do different things. You know, the whole blockchain industry is going this way and chasing each other's tails. Like, we're going this way. You know, there's this whole world out there outside of this little crypto bubble that needs help. And those are who we're working on. You know, all this crypto speculative, whatever, sure, cool. You're going to be the next. You're the next. You're the whatever. You're the best. Cool. Go for it. We're not focused on that. We're focused on what can we do for people now, right? Our weakest point in Nexus, making me do a SWOT analysis, huh? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Biggest threats for Nexus. I mean, part of it is a smaller development team. I guess that would be a weaker point, but in a sense, it's a stronger point too, because we can pivot and develop really quick. I mean, I'm getting a lot more done now, like than I had when I had 2 developers like Scott. I mean, I can't tell you how frustrated I always was too, because they just never cared about the quality standard, and they just like type in bad variable names, and I'm like, what are you doing? You know, it's just like, oh my god. So I'm really happy now without them, to be honest. So I don't know if that's necessarily the biggest weakness. I mean, I guess it's just the size that we are. I mean, that's a weakness and a strength. We can pivot development a lot quicker, but we don't have as much buffer and liquidity as, you know, other coins too. So it's, but then again, like at a lower liquidity, like it's a lot harder to move the price with a lot more coins. So, I mean, I guess the biggest weak point in Nexus is just, I mean, the biggest weakness would be like falling into the old mindset. I've noticed that kind of happen. It's been like 8 years of training people. Yo, guys, I'm not going to do this all for you. Like, I've got my part. We all have to do this together. That's, I think, getting stuck in that old mindset that a lot of people are just waiting around for the CEO of Avalanche to save the day and do this. And they got their development team and they all got these CEOs, and then all the CEOs. Yeah. How are you a CEO of a decentralized project? How does that work? Central or chief executive or, officer, is the most centralized thing you can get. But, a lot of people don't really care about that. So, the biggest weakness potentially is just that narrative of crypto steamrolling us. We're keeping Satoshi's vision alive with Nexus, right? And we're keeping the decentralized moving forward. But, people could very well choose, to drink the poison cup, and then, that's that. So I think probably one of the biggest weaknesses is that we're developing a more advanced system that, the world may not be ready for it. That could very well happen, or the world could be totally ready for it. And everything happens. I mean, I know I'm ready. I'm going to keep building it, whether or not the world's ready for it, because the world will be ready for it at some point. But over the period of time getting there, that it definitely we're a little weaker than, another coin that has, larger economies and stuff. It's a little, tighter funding wise, but, everybody is really passionate and committed on the team. So it doesn't really change much. I mean, we're not working for money. We're working for the vision and the goal, right? So yeah, make sure you remember that too, as a community, to not be a part of that conundrum or that weakness of, waiting for someone else to do something for you. Don't do that. We got to do these things together. We got to put all these things together. We got to work together to get these things done. That's the only way that this is going to really succeed. If we're waiting for CEOs or whatever, it's not going to work. That's a really powerful part of what we are capturing, and I'm seeing it happen more and more and more. It just takes time, and I mean, just to decontaminate that mindset of just like the master slave, yeah. So I guess that's my best interpretation or understanding of the weaknesses that we have right now. Yeah, and Kuba, yeah, thank you for the good questions too, Kuba. That was great. Yeah, it's good to ask those types of questions too, so we can all be intellectually honest and discuss these things too. I mean, I like to really, I don't want to say take pride, but I like to make sure that we all are really intellectually honest with each other, with our tech stack, because there's so much malarkey in crypto about, the best this and the fastest this and the first this, and we're a breath of fresh air from that, or for the most part, we want to keep everything, build good tech, but not say that we're better than everyone else. Build our tech and then help other people's tech, like Bitcoin, instead of being like, oh, hey, well, we developed a database, so we're better than you. It sets the wrong precedence, man. And I think I mean, the world needs more connection, right? I guess I'll close with this. This is an interesting concept. I've mentioned it before, but if anybody doesn't remember, I'll tell you. So they took a bunch of rats and they did this experiment, a social experiment, where they put a rat, put him in a cage, and they gave him 2 water bottles. One water bottle was water. The other water bottle had heroin in it, right? So I'm sure you can guess what happened. The rat goes in there, drinks the regular water, and then discovers a heroin water bottle and drinks it. And then over time, keeps drinking it, and then eventually overdoses and dies, right? And then that's, oh, don't do drugs, kids. It's terrible. Drugs. As soon as you're in front of them, you can't help yourself, right? Wrong. Because then they take the same setup, they do a bigger cage, and they put the heroin water and the regular water in there. But this time, there is rats as company, right? And guess what happened? When the rats had friends, when they were connected to one another, they did not drink the heroin. They didn't. They wouldn't touch it, right? So the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but it's connection, right? What does Nexus mean? A connection or series of connections linking 2 or more things. So we're here to help connect everything. That doesn't mean we're here to dominate the world. I mean, indirectly connecting everything, you're going to become a more dominant economic force, but that's not our focus. Our focus is to help connect things. If you're a Bitcoiner that's into your Bitcoin, big blocks or little blocks or whatever, cool, we'll help. Here's a database. If you're developing a web app, here you go, we'll help. If you've got, IoT supply chain tracking systems, here you go, we'll make that better, right? That's what we're here to do. We're here to connect people and build these things that help, rather than, trying to be better than everyone else or whatever. Like, when something really is better, you don't need to say it's better. You don't need to go around and be like, yo, Nexus is the best blockchain ever. Like, I mean, we've had people in the past that hired that said that, and it was embarrassing. But I didn't have the balls back then to fucking speak up for myself and be like, what are you doing? But yeah, everybody talks about being the best blockchain, and I don't think if something's the best that it ever really needs to be said. If something is, you always have to justify it. You gotta remember, if something's the best, it's just the best, and it just sits there. Now, I'm not saying we aren't. What I'm saying is we focus on developing beautiful technology that really helps benefit people's lives in more ways than one, right? And that's really, really important, fundamental. Ethos is we're not here to dominate or take over or kill anything. We're here to make everything better. So I guess that's the biggest distinction with us and Avalanche and Cardano and Ethereum and Dan Larimar is the other one, right? They're all just like fighting over scraps to be the Satoshi. They all want to be Satoshi, but they all forgot the fundamental fucking pardon my language. Satoshi walked away so Bitcoin could be free of him. Okay, Satoshi didn't want fame. All these dipwads trying to be the Satoshi of the blockchains, right? They're missing the fundamental point. It's not about you. It's about us. And that's the biggest distinction between those projects and us, right? I see this as Nexus is about us. It's Next for us, right? Get it? It's about us, right? It's the we, not the me, right? And that's really, I think, what the world needs right now. And we're building tech to make that happen. And the opposite of addiction is connection. So, we'll have a world addicted to prescription medications and candy and all sorts of stuff. I mean, the world is driven on addiction. Addiction is created in order to get people to continue perpetually consume. Now imagine a world where everyone's connected. What's it going to look like, right? We'll find out. Health insurance system. Yes, health insurance is terrible. Honestly, I think we don't need health insurance systems. We need just like contracts. So this is talking on your Cuba. Everybody throws 10 Nexus into this contract once a month, and then you have some sort of secondary authentication system to withdraw it out based off of claims, and then you have decentralized insurance in a smart contract where the money that you pay is not designed to earn some big company profits, but it's more designed to just cover the losses if you get in an accident based off of the statistics, right? So I think that could all be decentralized, no middleman, just community crowd-funded insurance. Hey, our neighborhood puts together an insurance crowd fund. Anytime anybody gets hurt, we can all draw on that up to a certain limit, and then people can self-organize and self-govern. Now that we've created a new social architecture for that, people can organize themselves in that. And then the DAO stack in 7.0, you'll be able to do all that voting and stuff on chain, and boom, you have decentralized insurance. That's the way I think it needs to go. It needs to be taken away from these big companies, because insurance is one of the most corrupted industries on the planet, right? Homomorphic encryption. Thank you, Stain. Homomorphic encryption is the method that we're going to go to in the future as far as providing anonymity. Homomorphic encryption allows you to operate on encrypted data. So that means that you can have special accounts that will be called a vault account that will be a homomorphic encrypted account. There is a need to hide your balances at some point in the future. Right now, we don't have that because we don't want CIA, NSA dirty money flowing through it. And we also don't want to have bats to beat us with, because what the NSA is going to do is they're going to run dirty money through it and be like, look, they use that for drugs. And that's what they do. Okay, so we're not giving them an opportunity. Like, okay, you want to do it, you're going to do it in the light. Here you are. Welcome to the light. Have fun. But in the future, once the world is at a more stable point, we're going to get to that. And homomorphic encryption is still really, really slow right now. I think it was like 5 milliseconds per gate. So, I mean, you got 64 gates, right? 64-bit. It's going to take a while. You can use GPU accelerated homomorphic encryption, but it is painfully slow. So is ZK Snarks, just painfully slow. I think it takes 2 minutes to generate a shielded transaction on Zcash. That's why only 5% of the people use it, because the only real reason you'd want to wait that long for a transaction is because you're hiding dirty money, right? So yeah, homomorphic encryption is one of the methods we're going to be looking for in the future. But right now it's just not even close to a focus yet. And Tornado Cash was kind of a really good example of that. Brings the laugh, it's true. Yeah, man. Yeah. All right. Well, I think the guys got to get back to work. They've been blowing up my phone. Anybody else have any questions before we close? We've got last little bit, and then good to go. You can speak up too if you want to say anything. Okay. I think that covered it. Invite 2 guests. You can invite whoever you want. Just for anyone, invite whoever you want. But if you want somebody to host with me, just give me a heads up. As far as, okay, Colin, I have this really cool dude that I want the AMA to be focused around. Like, I want you to talk to him directly and do a little AMA with him. Just give me a heads up on that. But if it's just guests to join in, you don't need my permission. I just need a heads up so I can know how to prepare everything. So, yeah, that sounds good. All right, sweet. All right, guys. Well, thank you again. We will be in touch next week. I'll keep you in the loop, or next 2 weeks. I'll keep you in the loop. We'll probably, like I said, the plan is to have a new mobile wallet release with the new 5.1 core, which should be our last beta cycle in the next 2 weeks. Right now, I met the mark, like I said, the last 2 weeks of that the 5.1 would be done and ready to play on hybrid, and it's done. I made it to the day. So last little bit with the mobile stuff. I'm going to do one more beta release, and then we're going to start the process of getting added to the App Store. So thank you for the time, everybody, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening.